that's the case, what we'll do is, Alex, open it up with Bud. And Bud, what I'll do is, can you hear me now, Bud?
That's a little better, yeah, Dan.
Okay. Our guest today is in his 42nd year in the big leagues, 42nd year in professional baseball. His 13th year as a manager and his 4th year with the Rockies. And I am really thankful, and as a chapter, we're thankful for Buddy Black to join us today. Buddy, thank you.
It's great to be on. It's great to be here. I'm impressed by this chapter. 167 consecutive monthly meetings. Is that what I heard? 13 plus years, Alex?
That is correct, buddy. That is correct.
Impressive. Cal Ripken-like streak for this chapter. So my pat on the back to this group. It's great to be here. I was talking with Dan earlier, and I see a lot of familiar faces on here. And I'm excited for the next 45 minutes or so to talk baseball and be here with this group, because I know this group is passionate about baseball, passionate about the Rockies, and I think the whole baseball industry. Anybody who's in on baseball, I'm in. So it's great to be here with everybody. So thanks for having me on, Dan. Thanks for extending the invitation. And I know that our group in Denver, led by Warren on this end, was excited to reach out to me to see if I could do this. So it's great to be here.
Awesome. Buddy, what are you doing during the virus?
Well, I think I'm doing what everybody else is doing. I'm on the down low. I'm here in San Diego. When I left Scottsdale, drove across the desert, came back home. Not knowing what to expect, what the immediate future held for us those last couple of weeks of March. We were gearing up for the season. We were gearing up to play. We were, basically 13 days away from play and then got shut down. So from that time on, I've done what everybody else has done. I've cleaned my garage 38 times. I've purged closets. I've done some work around the house. I got a 14-month-old granddaughter. So all the, just a lot of home cooking, a lot of barbecuing. I got 2 daughters here, so that's been great to hang out with them. And needless to say, obviously on the baseball side, connecting with staff, front office, players, everybody Rocky related. And also, trying to, get as much information as we can on the baseball side from the commissioner's office. Been on a number of Zoom calls with other managers and the commissioner's office about what's going on. And basically nothing really new that I can share that you haven't all read in the papers. It's all pretty accurate. But it does feel as though things are getting closer. I've talked a number of times to one of your colleagues I see on the screen, Thomas Harding, repping the Celtic green T-shirt today. Again, just being connected. I was on a Zoom call this morning with Altitude Sports. I'm on another Zoom call later this afternoon with a Denver TV station. So been pretty busy in that regard. Talking to people about baseball. So. Again, I'm looking forward to this 45 minutes or so.
So, Bud, you've got such a unique challenge with spring training being abbreviated. How do you envision that looking?
I've been asked that quite a bit, but I do know this. I can harken back to 1995, the strike year, 94, and then spring training in 95, where we had 3 weeks as well to get ready. They gave us a couple of dates of when the season was started, when spring training was going to commence. And in that time period, we all got ready. We were active at home, which I know all our players are, and I'm sure other players across baseball are doing the same thing. Position players are hitting, they're throwing, they're taking their grounders, they're working. They're doing their thing just like they would maybe in a typical January. getting ready for spring training. Pitchers, a little different, a little different feel for them. A lot of our pitchers with the Rockies stayed in Scottsdale, continued to throw under the eye of a couple coaches. We have Daryl Scott, our bullpen coach there. Jeff Salazar's there. Tim Doherty, our AAA hitting instructor, is in the Phoenix area. So, we've connected with a number of guys who are in Phoenix. A lot of our Latin players remained in Scottsdale. But, as you guys know, I mean, Nolan's working out in Orange County. Charlie's up in Denver doing his thing. There's like 6 guys up in Denver going to Coors Field, working out within the protocols that were set. We have our trainers in Denver, strength coach in Scottsdale and Denver. And we're connecting with all our players, all over the country to be ready for a 3-week spring training where I think we can get ready to play. And I know that the toughest part will be the pitch count part of it with our starting pitchers, but I don't think position players will have a difficult time getting ready. They might not be in great, game shape per se, just the stamina and the physical component of being on your feet and playing a game for 3 hours. But I know the other skills, the ground balls, the hitting, they got to get their timing the best they can when they face live pitching, and hopefully there'll be a few exhibition games at the end of a resumed spring training. So, that's sort of how it looks. We're keeping tabs of guys and where they are throwing, but we'll have to ramp them up for sure if it is a 20-day, 21-day spring training.
And one of the challenges, buddy, is the expanded roster. There's a lot of numbers being kicked around. I keep hearing 30. How do you envision that affecting you breaking and starting the regular season?
Well, when we were, down in Arizona initially, the 26-man roster, it came down to, 3 or 4 guys that were going to be close to making the team. So probably those guys, will make it, some of the extra position players. And I'm sure there'll be a couple extra pitchers, obviously, who will need to be on the roster. But I think you're right, Danny. I think 30 sounds like a pretty good initial number. And I think that will be whittled down as each week goes on. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think about some of the things we've talked about on phone calls, and even going back to 95, that they'll start with a number that makes sense for the health of the players and the conditioning aspect. And then as we get into a resumed season, it will pare itself down to 26 at some point.
I want to get into a couple of personal things, and then we'll open it up. And everybody's going to have an opportunity to do Q&A with Buddy. And again, Bud, we really appreciate you doing this with us today. There's a great story. A terrific scout on the West Coast told me the story how you got your opportunity at San Diego State University. You're playing for, I think, Lower Columbia College, about 40 miles from your hometown. And if you could tell everybody this story, because I think it's really a fun story.
Well, you're right. I grew up in Longview, Washington, right on the Columbia River, a pulp and paper town, not known for, a lot of baseball back then, right? I mean, Rick Sweet came out of there, a player that went to Gonzaga, then played for the Padres and the Mets. He was our claim to fame, in the early 70s. After I graduated from high school, I didn't have a lot of offers to go play at the 4-year college level, Division I, Division II. They weren't out there. I was a very undersized left-handed pitcher / first baseman. So I stayed in my hometown. I stayed in Longview, went to Lower Columbia College. Ed Sheff was the head coach at that time. He went on to fame at Lewis and Clark State College in Lewiston. Turned out a lot of national championships there. But, how I got to San Diego State, I had a friend of mine, a close friend, who went down to San Diego State as a freshman. And I was down visiting him during Christmas break. He was taking one of his finals. And so I walked around campus, went over to the baseball field, searched out the baseball office. I wanted to introduce myself to Coach Dietz, and tell him I was, a left-handed pitcher up in the Northwest, and knocked on the door, no answer. Knocked again, no answer. Tracked down a pen and a piece of paper and wrote a little letter to Coach Dietz about who I was, where I was from, my interest in coming down to California to play. And I slid that note under the door in December of 75. And sure enough, Coach Dietz read the letter. About a week later, got back to me. I was in California at the time visiting my parents. A little recruiting trip over to San Diego. And about 3 weeks later, I got a call from Coach Dietz offering me a scholarship to come to San Diego State. And I said, Coach, you've never seen me play. He goes, don't worry about it. I made some calls. I did my homework on you, and I want to offer you a scholarship to San Diego State. So that's sort of how it happened. I mean, it's sort of a crazy story that sight unseen, a major college program gave me an opportunity to play, and that's how I got to Southern California, and basically really my roots set in, for a professional career.
Now, you had a hell of a career. You're a great trivia question answer. Who started the Pine Tar game in '83? He's on this call, folks, and it's not Bill Ochbach, okay? It's not Kurt Wells. So you play for 15 years. You have a hell of a career. You win a World Series. You did a lot of really good things. When did you decide, and how did you decide to get into coaching and then managing?
Well, a couple of things fell into place late in my career. A lot of people, and I was motivated to stay in the game, but there was a lot of people who really encouraged me to stay in the game, either as an executive or a coach. And I heeded the advice of those people. Dusty Baker, for one, Al Rosen, Roger Craig. People throughout the game were kept asking me questions my last couple years about my future. And I knew I was going to stay in the game. And my last year as a player, 1995 with the Indians, I got released in July from a very good team. The team that went to the World Series in ~95 got beat by the Braves. I was part of that team. I was 4-2 with a 6.42 ERA on that 100-win Cleveland team, and got released. And John Hart, general manager, Dan O'Dowd was the assistant GM, Mark Shapiro was the farm director. They sort of put their arms around me and said, hey, buddy, we want you to stay. We want you to stay in the game, and we want you to stay with us. So long story short, for the next 5 years, Danny and the group, I sort of cut my teeth there with the Indians, learning a lot about player development, scouting, big league play, the role of a GM, assistant GM, farm director, scouts, all those things was a great education for me. And in 1998, I was the pitching coach up in Buffalo. I felt as though I needed to get some practical experience if I wanted to go the coaching route, which I did in a couple years with the Angels. But my roots and my baseball sort of foundation of off the field was set in those years from '95 to '99 with the Indians.
So you move on, and I think that was the first time we met. You were the pitching coach at Buffalo, playing our White Sox AAA club, and
Danny, you're cutting out again. Uh-oh. Danny, can't hear you.
Yeah, we lost Dan.
okay, I'm back now though.
There you are. You're back.
So you joined the Angels. I remember a coach of ours with the Dodgers telling me that might have been the best coaching staff ever. Can you talk a little bit about that great staff and winning the World Series in '02 as the pitching coach?
You're right. I love that staff. those years from 2000 to 2006, 7 seasons there in Anaheim were wonderful years for me. And I learned as much baseball in those years as I ever learned. I mean, tremendous baseball conversations with great baseball minds. Mike Scioscia was the manager. Joe Madden was the pitching coach. I'm sorry, Joe Madden was the bench coach. I was the pitching coach. Ron Renicky, the third base coach. Mickey Hatcher, hitting coach. Alfredo Griffin, first base coach. Bobby Ramos was our bullpen coach. And within that group, we had such great discussions about everything baseball. Obviously we talked at the ballpark, we talked on airplanes, we talked at restaurants. It was fabulous. And the education that those guys gave me really set me up for managing. Because at that time I hadn't really, thought about managing. I was so happy being part of that staff and handling the pitching. But as my years went on, I kept getting urged from Mike and Joe and others around me getting to put my hat in the ring to manage. And that's how it happened. Joe was the first to leave. He went to Tampa after the 05 season. I left after the 06 season, and then Ron went on to manage the Brewers, and now he's obviously managing the Red Sox, and Joe's back in Anaheim. But what a great group of guys in the group that guys who love baseball, passionate about it, and saw it from great perspective, right? I mean, this is the age when computers were coming into play. A lot of statistical data was coming our way. We were filled with that, and we were enjoying all of that. Obviously Joe was sort of the forerunner of our staff of processing that data, being the bench coach, and all of us talking about it from both the hitting side, the pitching side. It was wonderful. But those were great years, and the World Series year was awesome. Took the Giants down in 7 games. One of the best World Series that is in memory for all of us. A tremendous Game 6 with down 5-0 in the 7th inning, and Spezio's home run, Erstad's homer, Gloss's big double off of Felix Rodriguez. I mean, just a wonderful experience, and to win it as a player and to win it as a coach. I mean, 2 tremendous feelings, but different feelings. But I was so happy for so many people, and I'll never forget. Game 7 was great. 3 rookie pitchers, if you recall. John Lackey on 3 days rest turned it over to Brendan Donnelly to Frankie Rodriguez in the 9th inning. The only rookie pitcher, the only non-rookie pitcher, Percival, pitched the 9th inning. We won that ball game 3-0. So fond memories of that one.
Awesome. Amazing staff. So we're going to do some questions now from the group. If you have a question, raise your hand. Alex and I will call on you. We'll open up your microphone. We're just trying to keep the integrity of the call and not get into just a bulk chat. So if anyone has a question, either go into the chat and ask the question, or raise your hand in the virtual meeting and we'll call on you. And Alex, you're with me on this. I know you're seeing this. So if you see anybody, I know one question that I was given that I'll ask you, buddy, and I was asked by one of our members who can't be on today. How do you feel your background as a pitching coach helps you as a manager?
Well, I think that, I was asked that a lot early on when I got hired. And I think that, pitching is such a huge part of the game. And now, of a 25-man roster, now 26-man roster, the pitchers comprise half of that. I think a lot of you can remember back in the day that, pitching staffs, used to be 9 or 10 pitchers, and you'd have 15, 16 position players. But now the use of the bullpen the how you handle the pitching staff is such a priority that I feel, and I feel comfortable in that because I was in those shoes as a pitcher, and along the way, even in my pitching career, and the managers that I had, I knew. I just had that feeling of when pitching changes were happening. So, whether it was John McNamara, Dick Hauser, Billy Gardner, Roger Craig, Doc Edwards, down the line of my managers, Dusty Baker, I was thinking along with those guys as far as our pitching moves, and even the days in between starts, seeing how a bullpen was ran, knowing who was coming in, who was being relieved for, all those things, sort of became second nature for me, even as a player, watching it. So when I became a pitching coach and I worked with Mike, and then to the manager, the handling the staff, I think is, something that I feel as though my experience really helps me. Because I've been there and I've thought along with managers and I've been in those shoes. I know what, I know what tired looks like for a starting pitcher. I know what, his velocities, what his pitches look like. And even back then as a pitcher, I knew if Dave Winfield was 3 hitters away, I knew I was not going to face him. I knew that I was going to get taken out. If I knew that, Andre Dawson or Ruben Sierra, somebody that had great numbers against me, was coming down the line here in a few hitters or next inning, I knew I wasn't going to face them. Dick Hauser or my man Dusty, they weren't going to let me face those guys. So, these things sort of helped me, along the way in managing and, I do think that handling the pitching staff is probably the number one priority of all managers. I think you talk to any manager today and any executive or even you guys who followed the game, the thing that is most talked about is the handling of the pitching staff. Not only in game to game and just the moves that we make as a manager, but the hours before the game, the hours after the game, the interaction with the trainers, the strength coaches on our pitching staff. I think those conversations come pretty natural for me.
Okay, we have a question from Patrick Lyons. Patrick, go ahead. You've been unmuted.
Patrick, go ahead.
Buddy, great seeing you again. And Dan kind of stole my thunder with talking about the Pine Tar game from July 24th, 1983. But I know you and I spoke last season about the events that took place after that, when you guys had to come back to New York. Maybe you could share some of your favorite memories of that game, pre and post George Brett's monumental moment.
Yeah, quite a game, obviously, and I was able to rewatch it just the other night. Actually, I know you guys have seen it's been on a couple different times on the network, so I was able to rewatch it, which was sort of fun for me. But anyway, yeah, the aftermath of that, when the protest was held up and Bobby Brown ruled in the Royals' favor, we had to go back to New York to finish the game. So there was a common off day, both for the Yankees and us. We were traveling to Baltimore. The Yankees were off at home. So we flew into New York prior to going to Baltimore to get the last 4 outs of the game. The last out in the top of the ninth, after George hit his homer. And then that gave us the lead, and then we had to finish the bottom of the ninth to get the 3 Yankee outs to preserve their win. So the first thing, flying to New York, a couple things stood out. Obviously, George was not going to deplane. He was already ejected, so he never got off the plane. he went to a restaurant near the airport in New Jersey with about 4 other guys who weren't on the active roster. They started their libation a little early. So when we returned, they were in a pretty good frame of mind when we got back onto the airplane. Dan Quisenberry knew that he was going to pitch the 9th inning. He was a nervous wreck, being a closer, not knowing on a day-to-day basis whether you're going to pitch. He knew he was going to pitch. And he was a nervous wreck on that flight all day, and actually leading up for like 3 weeks. He knew he was pitching, he was a wreck. That was funny. Getting off the plane, on the bus, arriving at Yankee Stadium to basically a ghost town. Those of you who've been there, there's usually a buzz there of people hanging around where the visiting bus drops you off. No people there. Ghost town, crazy. I was there to throw. It was my day to throw in between starts, so I went to the ballpark, got my side session in. Nobody in the stands, nobody in and around the ballpark except clubhouse attendants who were taking care of the visiting team and the Yankees. Just a weird feeling. We got dressed, we went out on the field, we played catch. We got sort of loose. Some guys, took some swings in the cage just in case they're at bat, in case the game went extra innings. Just a weird dynamic. We were there for basically 45 minutes. The Yankees took the field, and the best thing, and you've probably most of you have maybe heard this, but the Yankees took the field. Immediately, Billy Martin had the pitcher appeal each base because it was a different umpiring crew. So he appealed first. First base umpire went safe. Billy Martin came out and said, "How do you know? You weren't even here." And Davey Phillips, an old umpire, came out with an affidavit, sworn affidavit from all the umpires that George did touch every base. So Billy didn't have to go around every single base because the umpires had an affidavit handy to show Billy. They had all their bases covered, so that was funny. Billy had to, buried his head back in his chest and went back to the dugout. Thought he had one up on us, but I thought he had one up on the umpires, but he didn't. That was pretty funny. But Guidry was in center field, left-handed center fielder. Don Mattingly was at second base when the game resumed. That was a different look. Quiz got the 3 outs, and we were out of there. I mean, it was a quick turnaround. Like I said, got back to the plane. George already had a glow on, and we headed down to Baltimore. But it was quite an afternoon. Rather quick, but I'll never forget it.
Oh, what a great story! That's awesome. I'm going to ask a couple questions from the chat room, Bud. Somebody asked, one of our people asked, have you been able to share or have some space to think about how to approach a shortened season, and would any advanced analytics come into play with that?
Well, we've talked about it, obviously as a coaching staff and our front office about, and even our players about, really being ready. We're going to try to ramp them up physically as best we can. We know that every game's important. We've talked about, obviously prolonged slumps or anything that could really get you behind the 8 ball. As far as the analytics, I really feel as though, we'll look at that depending on, who we're playing, what a week to 10 days look like. We'll have to assess where our pitchers are, where our hitters are as far as where they are strength-wise. But, that's a really good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one as far as, the advanced analytics. If anybody has any, any thoughts on that might help me and the team, feel free to let me know. But, we will dissect a lot of different things, during when our resumption of spring, when we look at our schedule, when we look at our players. I just know this, that, we're going to have to, every team's going to have to play well, right? They're going to have to play well and hopefully get off to a good start, because you don't want to get too far in a hole to try to dig yourself out, which we did last year. Obviously, we got off to a rough start last year and had a really tough July and early part of August that really hurt us a little bit. But we're gonna try to cover everything we can once we get into spring training.
Buddy, one of our board members asked a question. Is it still the plan to have the anticipated rule changes in effect during the shortened season?
I believe so. I think you can look for a couple things. The DH will be used. We'll not see pitchers hit in National League parks. I think the universal DH will come into play this season. The 3-hitter minimum is still in effect. That is not going to change. Those two things come into mind right off the top of my head. As far as replay, I think there's going to be I know they moved up the time frame to challenge. I think they sped it up by 10 or 15 seconds. So we're going to have to pull the trigger a little early if we want to challenge a replay. Is there any other rule changes that I missed that that might happen this year?
That was a heck of a question. I'm going to go now to Greg Petty. Greg, your mic should be open. Go ahead.
Hey, Bud, thank you so much for coming today. I mean, it's a real treat to hear you talk about this. One of the questions I'd have is, I'm kind of getting the sense of what the major league season would look like if the Players Association goes along with it. But how are you going to keep what I would guess was the 20 guys that are your backups for injury and everything sharp and busy? Because I would just guess there isn't going to be a minor league season, or is there?
Yeah, you're right. It's a great question, and we're trying to answer that ourselves. But you're right. I agree. It doesn't look like there's going to be a minor league season. The guys that do not make our roster, when we initially start, if we started 30, if we started 29, 28, whatever that number is, every team's going to have a group of players back in their spring training facility. Obviously, our guys will be in Scottsdale, and other teams will have their facilities up and running for that group of players who are basically on call. So there'll be a situation of inter-squad games. I'm not sure if there's going to be sanctioned games between other organizations in and around this time, or there will be easy access to play the 20 or so players from the Diamondbacks just to get different reps. Whether we'll go down to Mesa to play the Cubs, I have not heard anything like that. But our guys are going to, continue to stay as sharp as they can via the work in Scottsdale, whether it's inter-squad games, some type of scrimmaging, that sort of program. And also, I think there's talk of having a bigger pool of players who are free agents, who are fellas who maybe didn't make teams, or were part of the 40-man roster. That are in a independent league type situation where they're actually playing games against each other, where teams can maybe draw out of that pool of players. There's some talk of that. Again, I'm not privy to every detail, but I heard there might be some sort of situation like that.
So you would anticipate all the teams using their minor league facilities and dealing with the heat, maybe playing later in the day so that they're not just out there in 100-degree weather.
I think so. Or it's, I would think that's the most convenient to have them, in a spring training facilities, because you'll have, you can get coaches down there, you can have training staff down there. And obviously in Phoenix, it would have to be a really late afternoon, early evening situation, or early in the morning. Would in an extended spring where a lot of those days start at 6:30 or 7 in the morning when you're on the field.
Thank you.
Great question, Greg. But a really good question. I told you this morning, we've got people from all over the region that come to our meetings. Chris Moyer drives up every month from Colorado Springs. And Chris says two of his favorite players growing up were George Brett and Tony Gwynn. Do you have a favorite story about either or both of them?
Well, I just told the story the other day about Tony. Tony went to San Diego State on a basketball scholarship. He didn't play baseball his freshman year. Coach Veazey at San Diego State did not allow Tony to play baseball. So he didn't join the baseball team until his sophomore year, where the coach relented to let him play. So as you know, the baseball season, back there in the late 70s, we would start in, late January, early February. Our schedule would start up, and that was the tail end of the basketball season. So Tony wasn't able to practice with us. So Tony would, I think, sneak in the cage. He would play catch. He would do some baseball activity sort of on the down low and under the radar, where none of us saw him really practice. So when the basketball season ended, it ended on a Saturday night, and we had a Sunday doubleheader. So Tony basically left the basketball court the evening on a Saturday, showed up the next morning to our home field there on campus at San Diego State for a doubleheader. Coach Dietz put him in the lineup, and he proceeded to get 5 hits in 2 games. Got 5 hits. I think he went 5 for 8 in this doubleheader. But it just showed the natural hitting ability of Tony. Without any formal practice, to come right out and get 5 knocks. And George, you hear George talk, and you look at George's career, signed out of high school, and George was a talented athlete, could do a lot of things, but it didn't really happen for George early. I mean, he had to work really hard. But when I got to the Royals, George was firmly footed in his career. And the thing that I always amazed me about George was, the amount of hard contact that he had, at bat after at bat. The old saying where, a line drive would get caught, but your next at bat, you might get a blooper or a seeing eye single that they all even out. They didn't even out for George. I mean, George hit more balls on the nose than anybody I'd ever been around. And he very rarely hit bloopers or, he hit some ground balls that got through, but the broken bat hits were rare because he rarely broke his bat. And that's sort of the story that the Yankees had, with the Pine Tar game. George had his game bat that in that particular run of at-bats and games, he never broke it. And the Pine Tar sort of kept running up towards the head of the bat. But he rarely broke a bat. He rarely got jammed. He rarely hit it off the end. But man, just the hard contact all the time was something that amazed all of us. And I think in today's game, you look at consistent hard contact and exit velocity. I mean, George would be right up there with all the guys who do that regularly today in the big leagues.
That's great. I'm going to call Manny Randhawa. Manny, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you. We talked one time about how you started the first game I ever went to as a kid. It was August of 1992 at Candlestick Park. Against the Pirates. I think you tossed 8 innings. I think 8 scoreless or something like that. But it's nice that we can go back and look at these box scores now. You've been on a lot of teams. I got to watch you there, but you've been on a lot of clubs, whether as a manager or as a player. Do you have a favorite? I know it's probably a hard question to answer, but do you have a favorite club that you were on in terms of just either the camaraderie, the chemistry, or just a lot of laughs?
Yeah, Manny, I'm gonna give you like 4 or 5, favorite teams, and I'll start from the start. I think and they, obviously it's no coincidence that, a lot of the teams, they're my favorites were the ones that won, right? The 85 Royals team, was a great team. What made it great was, just the camaraderie of the guys. I think, we didn't have a great, record per se of a World Series team, but the collectivity of the group, the team chemistry, the camaraderie, the group really came together in '85. We were together in '84. The Royals, Sherholtz sort of changed over the pitching staff. We brought Lee Brandt, Saberhagen, Gubazah, Danny Jackson, into our club in '84, and it sort of crystallized in '85 with the World Series. So the '85 Royals team was a great team. The '93 Giants team, what a great team that was. We won 103 games and didn't make the playoffs.
You guys are the reason we have a wild card team.
As the story goes, right?
Yeah.
The Braves won 104. I remember that last weekend of '93, where the expansion Rockies were playing the Braves in Atlanta. We were playing the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. Tied going into the weekend, and we won 3 straight games against the Dodgers, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then lost the Sunday game, and the Braves swept the Rockies. So, that was a really good team. Matt Williams, Will Clark, Robbie Thompson, Willie McGee, Dave Righetti. I mean, a lot of true professional players were on that group. Another fun team was the Padre team of 2010. Really, a fun team of guys who were, not expected to win. David Eckstein, Tony Gwynn Jr., Jerry Hairston. That pitching staff of, Latos was on that staff, Kevin Correa, Wade LeBlanc. We took the Giants to the 162nd game and got beat by Jonathan Sanchez 3-0 up in AT&T. But that was a fun team. Adrian Gonzalez, was our best player. But you look at that roster, to do what we did that year, that's one of my favorite teams. And the 2018 Rocky team was a fun team too. Kyle's big year. That group of players which you guys are all familiar of. That's a fun team. The 18 Rockies was a good team, as long as the 17 too. But those the winning teams always sort of correlate with favorite teams. But to this day, those Royal teams, I'm still very close with that group of players. George. You guys are familiar with Jamie Quirk, Pat Sheridan, Saberhagen and Gubazah, Charlie Liebrand. I was texting with a couple of those guys this morning on different things, but those relationships and those friendships have never died, and that's a group of players that I hold dear to my heart. Those early Royal teams.
Terrific. Great question, Manny. Buddy, do you mind 2 more questions? You okay?
Yeah, let's keep going.
Awesome. I had a question here in a private chat. Somebody asked me to ask you, did anyone open your eyes in spring training unexpectedly, either a minor leaguer or a non-roster invite, who surprised you and played really well prior to the stoppage of play?
It seems like so long ago, doesn't it? I mean, let me think. Non-roster, was playing well. It didn't really surprise me. We've seen this fella, and we were hoping for good things for him, and maybe it will happen. But Chris Owings, even though he's not a young player, we saw him with the Diamondbacks, and he had a rough couple of years, but he was really playing well. He was really playing well in the spring. He missed some time because his wife gave birth to their first baby, but Chris Owings was really, showing some good things with the bat and, his energy as a player. Hopefully when we resume, and if he does make the club, he can add a nice piece to our club. You know, on the pitching side, we saw a little bit of James Pazos last year. He was throwing the ball well. You know, liked what we saw from Pazos this spring. You know, Hilliard statistically, even though he didn't have a very good spring, I think he's gonna turn out to be okay in the long term. Sam Hilliard. You know, I like the way he was going about it, even though it didn't show up statistically in the games. But you know, I think he's going to be a good one.
And Buddy Owens can play a number of positions for you too.
Yeah, he sort of mirrors a little bit of what Garrett Hampson can do. A little bit. They're sort of the same type of player. He can go to the outfield. He can play short and second. You know, he's got a little pop in the bat. Getting back with Dave Magadan, I think, will help him. You know, he sort of got off track a little bit with his swing the last couple of years. And hopefully he can recapture, some of the things he did as an early Diamondback, because he's only 28 years old. There's still a lot of baseball left in Chris.
Mm-hmm. Going to call on Kurt Wells. Kurt is our vice president of our chapter, and Kurt was actually on the commission bringing Denver Major League Baseball, Buddy. So he's got a lot of history with our city and our region. Kurt, go ahead.
Bud, I really enjoy hearing you tell stories about the earlier days of your career, but I've got one, just a quick one. I'll make it fast. But with the push to keep the players away from each other when they come back, has there been any talk about reinstating the vicinity rule at second base on sliding in so there aren't the collisions and not,
That's a good question. I think that, replay has taken the vicinity rule out of play. I know that the crux of the matter is, making sure that, how players slide, how players are instructed to avoid collision. That's been the main topic about contact with each other. So I haven't heard that. I know that what I have heard is that some of the kibitzing around the bag that the first baseman might have with the runner, the umpire might have with the first baseman, the first base coach with the umpire, all those things are being discouraged. How that will actually happen in a month or so from now, we'll see. But I don't think there's been any conversation about loosening any sort of situation where to avoid contact with each other. I know that all the focus has been on, cleaning up certain slides in that regard to that play around second base.
Thank you.
Terrific question. We got one last question, buddy. Someone sent a private message, said, does a compressed season where every game in essence counts as double, does that change your in-game approach going into this season?
I think you have to look at each game individually, but I do think that this will have an impact on each game and how it's managed. I think you still have to manage a season, even though it's a half a season. You have to realize that there are times when a starting pitcher might have to be left in a game, to be able to win a couple of games down the road or so forth. But you also know that, we have to keep a guy fresh for only maybe 16 starts instead of 32. So, you could see at times a quicker hook based on, where a game is and the leverage of a game for sure. So the big question for me is, balancing that, watching a pitching staff or a position player over the course of 162 games, there is a stamina and a durability component to that, and to keeping a guy healthy and as fresh as possible. That type of situation is going to be reduced a little bit now, where you might not think about that, and you might have to, push the envelope a little bit on certain games and make certain moves that might be a little bit more urgent to win that game, knowing that you don't have to think long term about what you in regards to handling players. So I do think there's a component of the shortened season and strategy for sure.
Buddy, I wanted to bring one other person into the session, and Herb Shankman, I talked to you a little bit about, who played with the Boston Braves organization, a fellow left-handed pitcher. So right away, he's brethren for you.
Love that.
Herb's on the call today. And Herb, if you could unmute yourself, I would just love you to say hello to Buddy, because I told Buddy about you today, Herb. We chatted about you a little bit. I see you on the call. Would love to give you a chance to say hello to Buddy. I know he's on the call. I know he is, Buddy. I can see him.
Well, I know, Dan, from our brief conversation this morning, you mentioned that Herb still goes out and plays catch. You guys as a group find a way to play some catch and ball the glove and all that. And I love that about Herb. And still, one of my favorite things is to still play catch. I love it. And I would, if Herb ever makes it out to a game, I don't know where Herb is, but if he makes it out to the game, Dan, maybe you can facilitate this. I would love to play catch with him out in front of the dugout at Coors Field, if we can arrange that. How about that? Can we make a date that Herb? I want to play catch with a guy that played for the Boston Braves.
Awesome. He's got a hell of a pickoff move to this day, buddy.
Maybe he can teach that to Freeland.
Well, we're going to follow up on that. We're going to make sure Herb does that. Herb's a great story, and he's the epicenter of our group. We just all adore him.
I love that. I'm glad that hopefully Herb's getting this. But, when you told me that story about Herb and his pickoff move and Roland Heeman and the Boston and the Braves, I love that stuff, man. Because you guys have been, Manny and Drew and, Thomas and Patrick, you guys were around a lot in the dugout. You hear me talk about old stories. I love that stuff. And I love that you guys get together every month, Ripken style, 167 straight, 13 plus years of the chapter. It's awesome.
I love it.
Love it.
Buddy Black, I cannot say thank you enough on behalf of our chapter. Everybody on the call, we're still going to talk a little baseball after we're done with Buddy. We're going to keep it open for about a half an hour. But Buddy, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this, taking some time out of your day. Our chapter is grateful for you to do this.
You got it, Dan. It was great talking with everybody. And like I said, some familiar faces. And I'm looking at the screen. I don't see everybody, obviously, but I'm looking at backdrops of Coors Fields. I'm seeing uniforms on the wall. I'm seeing, lineup cards. I'm seeing some people smiling. I'm seeing Rocky hats. So anyhow, go Rockies. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate everybody. And I love talking baseball. Keep talking. Do your thing.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Dan.
You can hang with us. We won't crush you very much for the next half hour. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Hey, it's all part of it. Hey, listen, I've been, it's been part of the 42 years, so do it. See you guys.
Thank you.
Well, so let's talk a little baseball, guys. And wow, that was outstanding. Buddy, thanks a ton. From this point forward, if you have a question, a topic you want to bring up, just raise your hand in the chat room. We'll open it up. I think it's pretty cool. With Manny unmuted, go ahead.
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to say thank you.
Manny, go
because-
ahead.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, thank you, because this is another tremendous guest to be able to just talk ball with. I think that you have really changed the game for this chapter in a lot of ways, but partly in doing this. I mean, this is expanding our reach technically worldwide. I mean, anybody could jump in if we give them a code. So thank you for doing this. Buddy was great. To having Tim Mead on here was awesome. So thank you for all your efforts and making this really, especially in a time like this where it's, we're kind of we're dying for dying for baseball content. So thanks again, and you really outdone yourself. So thank you.
Well, Manny, that's really kind. I'll tell you what, Buddy Black's one of the best guys in the game. And you can all see why. He's just an absolute great dude. And
No doubt.
he couldn't have said yes quick enough to my invitation. He was all over it. And a quick story about Buddy Black. Dave Roberts is one of my very best friends. And Dave was his bench coach and one of his coaches. And Dave Roberts prepared for that meeting with, admittedly myself and Buddy Black with a lot of interaction. Now, Buddy's going to lose his bench coach to a team in his division. Didn't even think twice. Glendon Rush, I represented as a player, was on one of Buddy's teams in San Diego. And when I told Glendon yesterday, a left-handed pitcher, I told Glendon that Buddy was going to be the guest. Glendon said to me, he said, easily the best manager I ever played for. What an absolutely great guy. And you guys all saw it today. I mean, he's terrific. Terrific.
No doubt.
So, and that was a great question for you, Manny. That was awesome. Looks like David Murray has a question. Alex, can you open up his mic?
Yep.
David, go ahead.
Dan, I just want to thank you again. Repeat what Manny just said. Terrific get in getting our manager. Question for you, Dan. From a scouting standpoint, with this pandemic going on, are you staying at home or are you still scouting in Japan? For the life of a scout, what's going on in your world?
David, great question. I'm not working for a club anymore, David. I am a billboard. Here we go.
There you are.
For the Field of Dreams. I'm overseeing the Field of Dreams movie site, and I'm not scouting anymore. I'm actually very thankful I don't have to get on planes and sit in ballparks this year. That would be scary as hell.
Okay.
It's been really interesting. I'm consulting for a Japanese team and a Korean team, and they're ahead of us right now. The Korean teams are playing their in-season. The Japanese teams are a little closer than we are, and the Taiwanese teams are playing. And
We lost you, Dan.
Yeah, we lost you.
We did lose Dan. He'll come back in a minute. Bear with us.
yeah, hold on. It's my internet.
There
Okay,
you go.
I should be back now. They're worried about pitchers and not being really ready to start the season. And I think Buddy, alluded to that a little bit. We're going to have that. But that's, we're all doing this for the first and hopefully only time.
From the Field of Dreams standpoint, are they planning a game for next year? I know that there's
We're going to play August 13th of this year. We're going to play a game in Dyersville at the Field of Dreams movie site.
Okay, so
And that game is still on, and we're going to play that game. So it'll be a lot of fun. And I'll do a quick plug for my group. Our website has some super cool shirts. Oh my God, they're so cool. So check it out if you want. Kurt, looks like you have a question. Alex, can you open him up?
Go
You know
ahead,
what?
Kurt.
There. Dan, I was actually waving at you to tell you we couldn't hear you, but I will make a comment while you've got me on here. You'd mentioned
okay.
you'd mentioned Dave Roberts being a close friend, and I just wanted to point out you ask players a lot of times questions like we asked Bud Black, and I had asked Clint Barmas, who's the best guy you ever played against as far as just people goes, and without hesitation, he said Dave Roberts. So it sounds like he's just a great guy from everything I've heard.
He's awesome. I know a lot of you don't like him because he's a Dodger. Probably the second best character of any player I've ever been around. Jim Abbott would be number one for me, but Dave Roberts is 1A.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kurt, that was, by the way, that was a very good question for Buddy. That was true.
Well, thanks. I did enjoy the
So,
historical
looks
answers.
like
more.
Greg.
Yeah. Dan, I want to thank you again for getting Bud.
Yeah.
Comment
Greg.
about Bud is that I know that being a manager eventually falls into how well you're relating to your players and you're getting stuff out of them. But I think he's a tremendous class act, and I love his interpersonal skills, which just we're fortunate to have him. My question is for you. Bud was asked about what he thought about if the season was going to open and when. Do you have any insight into that? I mean, I know that it depends on the Players Association and those negotiations. You got any guesses as to how that's going to turn out?
I think both sides know that there's too much at stake to not play. So I think they'll ultimately come to a decision. They'll come to a deal. My guess is we're playing baseball by the 4th of July for keeps. I think we'll have spring training somewhere before or around Father's Day, if not earlier, Greg.
Okay.
I think the big wrestling match right now is that the labor agreement is up at the 21 season. And as a result, both sides are already dug in a little bit. They're throwing things around like manhole covers. So it's not quite the same negotiation you would normally have. But for those of you who have listened to the commissioner, I think it's been very clear that he's doing all he can to get.
We lost you again, Dan. Can't hear.
There you go.
Now I'm back. I think we'll be playing soon, Greg. I really do.
And do you think the safety issues plus the players being able to be with their families, I mean, those two things kind of are, you're going to lock down families and players. So the players want safety, but they want to have a family life. Those two things kind of run into each other. Is that going to be solved?
They do. I think a lot of them are in the same boat that the rest of us are in. The unknown, no vaccine. How is the testing going to be? How are you going to keep us healthy? And if one of our teammates should contract the virus, what happens to us?
Right.
I've had so many players ask me that in the last week. What do you think will happen? Well, I mean, obviously nobody knows, but I think there's a real good chance that somebody's going to test positive over the course of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how they handle that is really, that's the magic move in 2020. So looks like you're up. You got a question or a comment?
My turn?
I see your hand up, big dude. Go ahead.
How y'all doing? Thanks for doing this. With the Players Association going on and saying the $4 billion loss by owners and stuff, is there any players that would be willing to sit out? Do they still get paid? Do we have that discussion? Also, are California and Illinois and New York, where this is getting hit really bad, going to open up their ballparks to allow even games to be played even without fans?
That's a really difficult question right now, Sully, because every state
think we lost you again.
Earlier, when it comes to the players, Sully, Commissioner Manfred said the other day that if a player didn't feel comfortable playing, he doesn't have to play. And, I know they're in the middle of negotiations, but there might be a player out there who just doesn't feel comfortable. And I think there's going to be multiple guys. Whether they would accrue service time and get salary, I do not know. But I will tell you all in this call, salary is really important. But for a player with a very short shelf life, Major League service time is massive. That's what brings the money. So without the service time, you don't get free agency and arbitration. So I think that's going to be the central issue of these negotiations. Man, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put my hand up. I'm not sure what happened, so.
Put your hand down, damn
Carry
it.
on.
Let's go. Get your math homework done, man. Please.
I know, seriously.
Patrick Lyons, Patrick, you're up. Go ahead.
Hope everyone's been enjoying. Dan and Alex, thanks for coordinating this and getting Buddy on. Curious how everyone's been enjoying the KBO coverage on ESPN. If anyone's getting up at 3:30 in the morning, I've been. But even more specifically, Dan, of the players that we've been seeing in the KBO, I know Sungbum Na has Scott Boras as his agent, and Bakho Gong seems to be the guy that may have the most upside, particularly because he's a 20-year-old player who already has about 50 home runs underneath his belt in South Korea. So maybe you can comment on some of the guys to keep their eye on to make the leap across the pond.
Yeah, good question, Patrick. You know what? Now everybody's starting to see what I've been doing the last 6 or 7 years with absolutely brutal sleep patterns. You sleep till 3 o'clock, turn on Japanese or Korean baseball, and then go back to sleep for a few more hours and then go there. Good for you to watch those games. The shame of it for everybody, the atmosphere of the KBO games is like a carnival. And it's just not going on right now because there's no fans in the stands. But it's an amazing place to watch baseball games. You mentioned a couple players. I love Na, the right fielder for the Dinos. He's a terrific player. I've been watching him play, Patrick, for about 8 years now. He was a pitcher in high school, throwing 97 miles an hour. And the great manager of the Dinos just retired last year. Put him in as an offensive player in his rookie year instead of pitching. He had like a 4-for-5 game, and the rest is history. He's the Babe Ruth of his time. Na's a terrific player. He got hurt last year, or else he'd be in the big leagues right now starting for somebody. I love him. I know when I was with the Blue Jays, the last report I wrote on him, I think I gave him a 65, plus glove, unbelievable arm, big bat, steal bases. He broke his leg last year. I don't know how he's running quite yet, but boy, he's good. And the 20-year-old kid you talked about, oh my, is he a good player. I saw him in high school, and I went.
We lost you again, Dan.
And hold on, I see. And for me, Patrick, see, I think their level of play is about AA, but I don't care. I love seeing baseball again. It's just great. I'm looking in the chat. I'm looking on the screen. Hands up. Let's see. You know what? Someone brought up something. Let's turn to Nicolette. I think you're still here, Nicolette. I'm looking for you.
Here.
Do you see Nicolette?
I'm here.
There she is.
I'm here.
I'm going to unmute you, Nicolette. what's your thinking about the medical side?
Okay,
I hear you, Nicolette.
I'm here.
You're one of the experts in this field. What do you think about the medical situation right now?
Well, it's kind of fascinating. I've been working with the CDC.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. It's kind of fascinating. I've been working with the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, on tracking virus. I've been working with Bob Redfield, the head of the CDC, and Tony Fauci, who was one of my mentors when I was a rookie. And, you know, there are several companies that are in trying to make vaccines. The SARS virus, there are several things out there now that we use for cancer that do attach on some of what makes the virus replicate, okay? Now, that's not definitive, and certainly we're still testing. We're more in the test tube phase, because you know that what goes on in the test tube is sometimes very easy. Once it gets in the body, the body's just has a field day. We're not good at controlling bodies, but on a cell-to-cell level, sometimes we can kill things. I align this to AIDS, where I killed it 1,000 times in the lab, but I wasn't successful in a patient in the 90s and mid-80s. As far as testing goes, you know, National Jewish Hospital, whom I can't say enough good about, is one of the centers for testing. And I've been curious that, you know, viruses do funny things. You're positive this week and you're negative this week. And while you're positive, you pick up or negative, you pick up an antigen, and then you become positive. So I would think of players, you know, when they're on the field, I hope they wear masks, which would be horrible, but, you know, I'd really rather not having them breathe in pumpkin seeds or bubble gum or spit. And I think that if players are playing or people are in relative close contact, because you're playing baseball, how can you not come in close contact, which makes the game fun? I would think that they would have to be tested relatively positive, you know, frequently. I'd say 10 days. It's not an invasive test, although there are serological tests and a nasal swab test. Right now, the nasal swab seems to be better if people really know how to do it correctly, and they have to really be trained. The serology tests, which are your blood tests, are doing pretty well, but their ELISA, which is the oldest testing mechanism, the nasal swab, is our newest testing, PCR as we call it. And that's what is kind of, they're bouncing around as gold standards. Vaccines are scary, we're trying, but you know, it always has to go for the first time in a human being. This isn't something we can put in a rat first. We have to put it in a human first. And I deal with that on a different level. I deal with that on very sick patients whom I do the first in man testing on mostly, and the last hope patients for what we do first in man. But it's going to be very difficult because somebody's got to be first. And that's, you know, what those consequences are.
Great.
Just my 6 cents worth.
Nicolette, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great point, though. Thank you.
Dan,
You know,
Paul's been trying to ask a question for a long time.
Paul, I don't see your hand up. This is a classroom setting. There we go.
Unmute yourself.
Let's see.
How about that? Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go, Paul.
Yeah, it's been
Yes,
up.
go ahead.
a bit, so, but somebody just, Nicolette just mentioned seeds. I just heard today that, you know, and I just sit and read the paper and watch the network occasionally. But they're talking about not prohibiting high fives, fist bumps, body bumps, tobacco, and seeds in the dugout, and then all the players leave and shower at home. So that's going to be a very different baseball world. It was just a comment, not a question. See what everybody else thinks of that scenario.
Yeah, it's like a summer ball game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine playing without sunflower seed. I did that all the way till I was 20 years old. I can't imagine playing in the field without seeds in my mouth. That's unheard of. That's kind of crazy. You know, one of the things Buddy and I talked about today in the morning and yet a little bit yesterday is something that he hinted about today was the designated hitter rule. And the reason the DH, just so everybody knows, and I know this is a National League centric crowd, the reason the DH is going to be utilized is so pitchers don't get hurt. And more importantly, so American League pitchers who never hit don't try to hit in National League ballparks. The other thing is they're worried that there'd be a lot more substitution. To be honest with you, people who have managed in the American and the National League think it's harder to manage in the American League. And the reason is because the pinch hitter and the pitching changes don't take care of themselves like they do in the National League game. And because pitchers won't quite be ready, they feel having the American League rule will allow the pitching coach and the manager to kind of freeform it and make work. And I think that's going to be one of the complicated things we're going to see in the initial stages. In '95, we started the season with 20 days of spring training. Guys weren't ready. Some guys were only ready to go 2 or 3 innings. And the entirety of the first month of the season wasn't very good. And that's something to just keep your eye on. You'll find out a lot about players, what kind of shape they report. Because 3 weeks, it's not enough time to get ready. Other questions people have. Thank you, Bill Lamberty. That's a really kind comment. Blair, you mentioned the no spitting that Paul referred to. This is going to be like a Cape Cod League, a Northwoods League. They're going to shower back at their hotels and their houses. That's the way it's done in summer ball at the college program. And you know what? That's what these guys are used to. A lot of my
We lost you, Dan.
No, I don't think so. All right, Alex, do you see anything else? Do you any other chats, any other comments?
Dan, there was a couple comments and questions asking what's the Field of Dreams website address again?
It's FODmoviesite.com. FODmoviesite.com. Instagram is Field of Dreams Movie Site. Twitter, FOD Movie Site. Facebook, same thing. Baseballism has all of the apparel. Oh my God, we have cool stuff. I mean, super cool stuff. We're going to do a few luncheon gifts here and there. We're going to have some fun. We're going to open the gift store on the Field of Dreams site in mid-July. And when that happens, I'll have some shirts for one of those meetings afterwards. We'll have some fun. Other stuff, Alex, do you see?
I saw a question, Dan, about whether or not the schedule would be completely redone or whether any games would remain that were originally scheduled. And I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it, huh?
Greg, that has fluctuated on almost a daily basis. I'm lucky I get on conference calls every day on this subject. You know, sometimes they're talking about the schedule just resuming from the point of the schedule and just inserting some games and make the regional games work. They're not going to play crisscross against opposite divisions. They're going to stay the Central with the Central, the West with the West, East with the East. You know, in '95, they just picked up the schedule. They literally picked it up, and that's where you started. They're vacillating on.
Lost you again, Dan.
Ability. I don't think we have anything. I see a little bit about the draft. There's a question from Chris. who's enjoying one of the great senior years of all time. With the shortened draft, many teams pitch a first mentality. Will top batting practice prospects fall due to a run on pitchers? Chris, I'll tell you what, I've talked to a lot of scouts. They're going to go with a 5-round draft, the ability to sign 5 more players at a max of $20,000. The teams with the best scouts will hit the jackpot. The teams that are analytically inclined will struggle and are struggling. They're scared right now. They don't have a feel for a lot of players. They're really statistically oriented. But I think this more than ever will be the year of a college draft. I think most high school kids are going to move into the college game, and the NCAA is going to I think they're going to ease the restrictions on the 11.7 scholarships. So I think, Chris, what you're going to see is an abbreviated draft with very pitching heavy. And I also think that the elite high school kids, very few of them will sign. Most of them will go to school. I see we had Chris Moyer is up. Chris, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, following up on that question, obviously with the unlikeliness of minor league baseball and with this new contract that they're trying to build for the minor league baseball, we're already starting to see some clubs that are going to be forced to cut back on their scouting staffs. How is that going to be an impact, especially when you've got clubs that are going to be contracted, and then obviously teams that are going to be scaling back their scouting systems with this new proposed system they're talking about?
Yeah, and Chris, it's not just the scouts. There's player development people that are losing their jobs, getting furloughed. More than half of the front office staff of every big league organization is non-baseball. It's the business side of the game, and I think they're going to be affected adversely also. I talked to a GM this morning with a club who told me that there's going to be just really sad situations throughout the game. This is a devastating virus for the country, for the world. But I think for baseball front offices on the baseball and business side, it's going to be devastating. It's going to be a really bad situation. The Angels made an announcement yesterday that almost all their player development people will be furloughed. I know another club that's about to announce that. It's going to eradicate a lot of front office people's careers. And, for teams that want to poach, it's going to be a really good time to poach, candidly.
And also,
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
One other thing, I've been watching some of the KBO baseball and stuff like that. What is your, just seeing the different stadiums there in Korea, what is one of your favorite KBO ballparks out there?
Oh, easy. The best ballpark is the Samsung Park. It's in a city called Daegu, which is in the southern part of Korea, Daegu Park. It's about 3 years old, maybe. Chris, it's unbelievable. The facility itself for the fans is amazing. Proximity to transportation. The ballpark experience, amazing. There's scoreboard in right center field. For everybody who's watching these KBO games, watch the game where the Samsung Lions are the host team. That ballpark rocks. It is absolutely
we saw some of that this morning.
Yeah, it's just a great park. And they have stuff on the scoreboard where they put, it's really amazing. They put TrackMan information on the scoreboard. They put some Rhapsody stuff on the scoreboard. You'll have spin rates. I mean, I've never seen spin rate in a ballpark. And it's in the KBO Samsung Lions Park. Brand new ballpark, obviously owned by the Samsung Corporation. And as a result, it's just a remarkable facility.
Thanks again for bringing the guests here too.
You're welcome. And the food at that ballpark, Chris, oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. I think the coolest thing of today was Bud Black offering Herb a chance to play catch, and we're going to make that happen. I think that for me was the most awesome thing that happened today. And Herbie, I know your mic's closed right now. I'm going to reach out to you this evening. That's going to be a blast. Representing our chapter on the field. I hope Bud's got a glove with a nice pad in it, because I can see Herbie throwing his cutter and just crushing Buddy's thumb. So that'll be really, really cool. For everybody on this call, we thank you for being a part of this today. We've got to leave because the national chapter needs the site. Alex Marks, can't say thank you enough for everything you did to help us out on this. Paul, thanks for giving us the chance to do this, and the board members, thanks for giving us an opportunity to reach out to our group and do this. This has been a lot of fun. Now you all know why Buddy Black is so well regarded within the game. That's who he is. Hope you all stay healthy. That's the real important thing. Hoping to see you sometime soon. Have a really good rest of your day. Look forward to seeing you all again. Take it easy, everybody.
Thank you, Dan.